All right. Let's go on to, stay tuned for that at the end when I'll tell you about what this is and give you your homework. The second mistake we're going to talk about today is writing stories that are not soul stories or six-figure stories. I know you don't know exactly what those are. I'm going to define them for you. Soul stories. This builds on what I've already said about the subconscious mind and your unique well of creativity. A soul story, the way I define it, it has two elements. Number one, it has to be a story that you are deeply passionate about. Back to energetics for a minute. Human beings are full of energy. We are electromagnetic beings. Okay. This is something that they are finally able to prove with science and to measure. And we infuse everything we do, everything we touch, and especially everything we create with our energy. So, what this means, we don't yet have the technology necessarily to quantify what I'm about to say, but I can tell you that the passion you have for your story bleeds into your words, the words that you put on the page, and the reader will feel it. They will feel it in an almost tangible way. Okay. This is why fiction writers have to be highly emotional people on one level or another. I don't mean necessarily that you have emotional outbursts. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that this presents, but we have to be very in tune with our emotions. And very often we're in tune with other people's emotions. We're people who absorb the emotions of others. But we have to do that. We have to be that kind of person. Otherwise, our stories would always fall flat if we didn't have the emotion to infuse into them. So, one thing that gets talked a lot about in the fiction writer space is writing to trend. So, let's say that a major trend comes up, the ones we've all seen in the last 15 years, there's vampire romance or billionaire or whatever. And people want to hop on that trend, like hurry and write a book for that genre to make some money. Some people say that it's a terrible thing to do and you should never do it. And other people say it's great, it works, you should totally do it. And the thing that I want you to appreciate about this is that some people who write to trend are very, very successful at it. They write the book, they publish the book, they make a ton of money. Others do the exact same thing and their books flop. So this is why it's actually a little bit ridiculous, the debate that goes on, because obviously the actual act of writing to trend is not the deciding factor here. It can go either way. So it's not like if you do this, it's going to work, or if you do this, it's not. There's something else going on here that's the deciding factor. So what makes the difference? It is the passion the writer has for the story they're writing. That's what makes the difference. If someone decides to write to a trend and they genuinely love that genre and that story that they're telling, their book will probably do well on that trend. If someone doesn't particularly love the genre and they're just throwing a story together to hop on the trend and make some money, their story is going to tank for exactly the reasons I already said. They're not feeling the emotion, the passion for this as they're writing, so it's not going to infuse their story, the reader's not going to feel it, and the book is going to tank. So having passion for the story you write is probably more important, especially to marketing and book sales, than people realize. Now, I know all of you, in just a common sense way, know that you should have passion for your story. You don't want to write something you're not passionate about, right? But we just need to recognize this as an energetic principle when it comes to creating a business out of our fiction. So soul story is a story you feel deeply passionate about telling. And the second element is that it does need to be written from your subconscious creativity. So everything we already talked about. And that's because it will infuse the story with your uniqueness, with your experiences, with your belief, with the lens through which you see the world. And that makes it so that it is your soul story. So back to when I said that we could all have the same outline and write a different story, assuming especially that we're writing that from our subconscious creativity, we're going to each be writing our soul story or our soul version of, if you will, of that story that has been outlined. And that's why it'll be different for everybody. If somebody just sits down and doesn't really feel it and just kind of throws something together based on the outline, that their story is probably going to tank. Everyone else's will do well if they're written from their subconscious creativity. So these are the two factors that go into soul stories. Soul story is not one that's come from the conscious logical mind. It's not a cliche or something that's been copied or regurgitated from other stories you've consumed. As the name suggests, it's full of elements that are uniquely you, that come from your beliefs, experiences, thoughts, upbringing, understandings, and everything else that goes into your identity as a human being. That is your soul story.
You want my phone, babe?
That's what she's saying.
Guys, we've
Yeah,
still got some
there's
people
ponies.
that are
You're gonna sit on the couch.
unmuted here.
You're gonna sit there.
Let me find who it is and I'll mute them.
Sit up here.
Liesl, you can
You want to sit on the
hit
couch.
mute all participants.
All right, come on. Yeah.
I'm looking for where I can do that and it's not coming
Here,
up.
baby.
Let me find it.
I can't play with those.
In the
All of a sudden,
participants
here, sit over here.
thing.
You wanna watch?
It's not showing up in my participants thing. I know it should be there. I know you're right, but it's for some reason it is not showing up for me. Just give me 1 second. I will just go through and make sure everybody is muted here. Okay, I think I got everybody. All right. Sorry about that, guys. Back to this. So now let's talk about six-figure stories. We covered soul stories. First of all, when I say six-figure stories, let me be very clear. My definition of a six-figure story is not directly about income. Obviously, I cannot and do not try to guarantee income to anyone. It's all going to depend on the work you put into your story and your author career. But I call these six-figure stories because they have the potential to become six-figure stories, to make six figures if they're marketed correctly. Now, some of you may be thinking, wait a minute, don't all stories have the potential to be six-figure stories? This is where I might surprise you a little bit. I'm going to go with no. Now, technically, theoretically, yes, I guess all stories have the possibility. But what I'm going to say is that there are certain elements that are necessary to create a six-figure story. And if you don't have those elements, then no, your story's not going to have the potential to be a six-figure story. So if you don't know what those elements are and you're just writing a story, then you could say, yeah, theoretically, you have a chance of hitting six figures, right? Everybody has that chance. But I'm talking about breaking down what is required to create a six-figure story, right? So we're talking about the potential there. Now, this is a pet peeve of mine. Tell me if you guys have heard this around the industry. People like to talk about how, you know, an author writes however many books, maybe they write 4 or 6 books, and most of them do okay, mediocre, and then finally one of their books hits it big. And what people like to say is that, yeah, it is because they learned how to market. Yeah, it is because they now have a bigger email list. But really, you know, and maybe they also, because they've written several books, they've become better at the craft of writing. And then somehow all the stars align and their book takes off. I hate it when people say that. There is truth in that all of those things the author has probably gotten better at. You know, when they first started, the first book we write is typically not our best one. You know, maybe we didn't know how to market. Maybe we didn't have a big email list. But the stars aligning to make something happen is just a way of saying that people don't know what it was that made the book take off. Okay. And I don't like that, because if you want to be able to replicate that kind of success, you have to know what went into it. So that's just kind of shutting the door on figuring it out. And that's why it irritates me a little bit. A six-figure story, number one, has to be a soul story. So six-figure stories build on soul stories. But there's an added element that six-figure stories have, in that they also serve the reader. So to illustrate this, let's talk about another debate we hear about in the fiction author space a lot. Writing to market versus writing to passion. Just to give a quick definition of what those are, writing to passion is obviously writing what you want as the author. You know, the kind of people that say, I write for me, it's my story, nobody's going to tell me what to put in my story, it's mine, I'm writing it. That's writing to passion. You're just writing what you're passionate about. Writing to market means looking at genre and tropes and genre conventions, obligatory scenes, and trying to give the reader what they are looking for in a story. This has been a big debate in our space for years now, But once again, most of the debates that go on in the fiction author space, I just have to kind of chuckle and shake my head at because they make no sense at all. Don't get me started on outlining versus pantsing. I mean, it's not that one or the other is good or bad. It's just the debate it gets to be utterly ridiculous. Anyway, in terms of writing to market versus writing to passion, it's a big debate, and people act as though those two things are mutually exclusive. They are not even a little bit. A six-figure story, the way I define it, is a story that does both. It has the passion of the writer infused into the story, as I've been talking about, and that produces emotion from the side of the writer. But it also serves the reader by meeting them where they're at and giving them what they want, which means writing to market, genre tropes, etc. Coming up with ways to serve your reader should fuel your passion more. So when you have a great idea for a story and you're loving it, and then you start doing your research into the market, figuring out things should make you even more excited and more passionate about them. Now, I understand that sometimes you'll look at a trope and you're going, I do not want to write that into my story, but I support that. If it doesn't feel right for your story and it brings your passion down, then I'm telling you, it's not right for your story. Don't do that. But you should be able to find things that actually make your story better and enhance what you've already come up with. And then you use that passion you have to write the story and incorporate the to market stuff so that you can serve your readers. They should go hand in hand. So when people say they don't want to use tropes because they're cliche or formulaic, or they want their writing to be more original than that, it's just that they're looking at it all wrong. Obviously, you don't and shouldn't write anything that doesn't resonate with you. So never force yourself to use any trope or write any genre or story that you are not completely in love with, okay? That's not writing your soul story, and you'll be hamstringing your sales before you even finish writing the book. If you're writing something that you are not passionate about, you're wasting your time in the worst possible way. And I don't want that for you. But what you should do is figure out tropes that resonate with you and will work for your story and enhance your story, and then turn on the tap of that subconscious creativity we talked about that I will be giving you a tool for at the end. And it's going to show you, meaning your subconscious creativity is going to show you how to use those tropes in new, exciting ways that are unique to you and that your readers will fall in love with all over again. This is how it should work. It's how you create a six-figure story. If it's not working that way for you, then something's wrong, something's amiss. Either you're trying to force yourself to write tropes that aren't resonating with you. And again, if it doesn't feel good or right to you, or you aren't super excited about it, that is your subconscious mind telling you to knock it off, okay? Listen to that. Remember, your emotions come from your subconscious. So if you're not feeling the emotion about this story or about this trope, that is a sign that you should not be doing that. So either you're trying to force yourself to write things that don't resonate with you, or once you've decided on your story and tropes, you may be approaching them with your logical conscious mind without realizing it. And if you're not approaching it with your subconscious creativity, it's going to create a whole lot of boring where those tropes are concerned, because you're just regurgitating the way everyone else has used them. You're not tapping into your creativity to make them uniquely yours. So you see what I mean? So once again, mistake number 2 is not writing soul stories / six-figure stories. And the way to do this, to fix this mistake, is just to start writing them. So it's important that you understand what a soul story is, because that is your passion coming through. And your passion is going to infuse the story and make the reader like it more, want to read it more, feel what you feel about the story. A six-figure story has the added element of also serving the reader. If you have both of those things and you are writing the story with enough emotion, writing from your subconscious creativity, then you have all the elements necessary to potentially write a six-figure story, okay? I think I kind of just said this. Six-figure stories, a soul story that also serves your reader, is the only story that is ever going to have a chance at becoming a bestseller. It's the only kind of story that's going to give you, the author, the true satisfaction and joy in what you're writing. And it's the only kind that is ever going to produce a catharsis for your reader. We're going to talk about this more in just a minute. So just to reiterate one more time before we go into mistake number 3, you need these things to create a six-figure story. So what I will say too is that any story out there that was written that is not emotional, that is not producing emotion in the reader, will never hit a bestseller list. Okay? That's not the way it works. Notice how dictionaries and encyclopedias, you never see them on the New York Times bestseller list. Why? Because they're just facts. They're good information, but there's no emotion there. There's no passion there. Any story that ever did well created emotion in the reader. And we're going to talk later on about different ways to create emotion. When I say emotion, you can create emotion in your stories in way more ways than you realize. We're not just talking about make your character cry more or put more happy, sad, excited, fear into your scenes. That's one way to create emotion, but there are about 10 others. Okay. And so just know that if you aren't doing this, if you aren't creating this emotion, this is why I say, no, not every story has the potential to reach six figures, because if these things are not present in the story, it's just never going to happen. If you put these things into your story, and then of course you still have to do things like edit well, cover, market, but then you have actually a really good chance of making good money on your story. Okay.